Economics. He's a course convener for data science and business analytics in the London School of Economics. And he is a lecturer there as well. That's where he's done his PhD and continued after his PhD lecturing, and now he's the course convener for this particular subject, which is very topical and current in our current time. And today he's going to be talking about the impact of the data that is becoming available in the information age or the digital age, the challenges and the opportunities that this introduces to all sorts of different sectors and industries, and also academia as well. And he's going to be going through some case studies as well and showing how some of that data is being used to generate data-driven decisions and outputs as well. The speech is going to be, or the lecture is going to be about 30 to 40 minutes, and then we're going to have some time for questions and answers at the end of the session. Without further ado, over to you, James.
Mishdita. That's all I know. Very good afternoon and a very warm welcome to this session. I'm delighted to be here in Pristina. I arrived yesterday. There's still much of the city I've yet to explore, but I've been kept very busy during this visit. I'm delighted to give this public lecture, and this is really due to the launch of our new, and this is a world first, a degree, a BSc in Data Science and Business Analytics. And I'm thrilled that Reinvest College has decided to offer University of London international programs, the three you see listed behind you there, management, digital innovation, economics and politics as well. But data science, this is really what I'm going to be speaking on this evening. I talk here focusing on challenges and opportunities. Good news, there will be no equations, no formulae this evening, but I'd like to look at sort of the big picture level about data science, what it is, demystify the term, mention one or two case studies I will be presenting this evening. Also, we'll turn our attention briefly to big data, again, what it involves, in particular, the challenges and opportunities which we face. Of course, there's a lot of uncertainty. We don't know the full potential of this, but it's a very exciting age to be in, this data-driven age. And a very opportune moment, I think, to combine this lecture with the launch of our BSc Data Science and Business Analytics degree. So, data science, a term many of you have perhaps heard before, but perhaps are a little unsure quite what it means. So let's focus on that word science. And I think we can relate that to scientists. And what do scientists, or good scientists, do? Well, it's about storytelling, doing some investigation, yes, but drawing insights and communicating those insights to a wider audience. The great Albert Einstein there, if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. So it's not just doing the analysis, you're building your algorithms, doing your coding, crunching the numbers. That's important, yes, but so too is communicating those insights, those key takeaways to the main decision makers. I'll go through various examples from a selection of industries, but typically the decision makers in a firm, let's say it's the CEO, the board, they're not the analysts. They're not doing the number crunching. They need to understand in simplistic terms, why is this useful and what actions should they take. So if we think about scientists, well, what do? They explore. The space shuttle there, now since retired, arguably a more modern image would have been SpaceX Falcon rocket, but some copyright images associated with that. Now, I'm not per se looking at space exploration. We can think of this more holistically. But that's what scientists are doing. They are exploring, and clearly a data scientist is exploring things using data, rather than, let's say, a laboratory, so to speak. And why are we exploring? Hopefully to discover. Hopefully to come up with these eureka moments. But research is 99% perspiration, 1% inspiration. You do not necessarily make a discovery instantly. Imagine you are digging a mine looking for gold or diamonds. You may have to sift through an awful lot of earth before you find that gold nugget or that 18-carat diamond. Maybe you're very lucky and you stumble across it immediately, but it can take a lot of time and effort. But when you do find it and you strike rich, of course, that is your eureka moment. So it's about discovering. What sorts of things? Some examples to come a little later. And hopefully you're creating and solving problems. What kinds of problems? Well, it will depend upon the context. Maybe it's business problems, maybe it's those perhaps in the medical sphere, trying to diagnose preemptively perhaps some diseases, some illnesses, and perhaps undertake some preemptive treatment. So various phrases and terms bandied around. If you ask different people to give definitions, you will no doubt get a multitude of different answers. This is perhaps my stab at this. Data analytics, the science of examining data in order to draw conclusions. So, of course, the examination of the data will require various mathematical, statistical techniques, adequately and suitably applied, maybe some assumptions made along the way, but it's drawing those conclusions and taking actions as a consequence. There's no point discovering something if you sit on that knowledge and don't actively use it in some particular way. DDD, a nice acronym there, data-driven decisions. And increasingly, we are living in the world of data-driven decisions. There aren't really many certainties in life. The old adage is just death and taxes. I'm not claiming that data-driven decisions always lead to success. What they can do, done correctly, is to increase the probability of success, to increase the probability of the good or desirable outcome. Again, some examples to follow a little bit later in this talk. Data science is more about the extraction of the information, that the data mining, the sifting through that potentially vast data set, looking for patterns, hidden relationships. Again, though, wanting to do something with these discoveries. So is there really a difference? This is perhaps somewhat of a semantic point, but perhaps a slight differentiation between focusing on applications and conclusions rather than the actual information extraction and the knowledge discovery. Note that word, discovery. My battery is running low, I'm sorry. So the knowledge discovery. So just as the scientist is trying to discover new insights. But ultimately, we want to make inferences from data and draw conclusions as a result. Okay, well, talking about probabilities, you might attach a low probability to the battery running out. An improbable event, but by no means an impossible event. So, there we go, we have energy now, which is excellent. So what's this all about? It is all about data, clearly. A few, by no means an exhaustive list, but a few industries where we could think about applying data science, business analytics techniques. Well, business analytics suggests, of course, business data. Arguably, the majority of graduates from the LSE, my alma mater, as well as my employer, as well as through the University of London international programs, will tend to go into the corporate sphere. But by no means is that the only possible career path. But just to give some examples, analysing sales data, marketing data, pricing data. If you think about a marketer, what are the sorts of decisions he or she needs to make? Well, we talk about the 4 Ps in marketing: product, price, placement, and promotion. You have a new product, a new discovery. You want to sell it. What is the optimal price point you should charge? Well, it depends. It depends on customers' willingness, propensity to spend on a particular item. And no doubt that would vary across different demographic groups. But we would want to try and estimate it and price things optimally. Financial risk. Only yesterday I received an email, an unsolicited email seeking my assistance. It's a startup in Hong Kong. They've got an app and they lend money. Now, of course, there are many money lenders out there. They are in arguably a saturated market. Well, I've been approached, again, just within the last 24 hours to see if I would be interested in helping them develop a statistical model to predict default rates. Should this lender lend money to a borrower? Well, yes, if that borrower would repay the money. Of course, we cannot know for sure. There will be risk associated with that. We want to quantify that risk. What is the probability, there's that word again, of default? We'll need to estimate that, and if we can do this accurately, we would then, the lender would charge an appropriate interest rate to reflect the risk of that borrower. Fraud detection. Credit card companies looking at transactions. What looks anomalous? If your credit card is being used on a website to buy a flight, I've done this myself from various countries, and if I'm in an unusual country for me, based on my previous transaction history, it will get flagged up. The bank won't approve that transaction. I find it frustrating, but I have to see, I understand why they've done it. They think it may be a fraudulent transaction. They can't know for sure, so a red flag appears. The transaction requires my human approval through perhaps a passcode or a phone call, say. Industrial processes. The plane I was on landed yesterday. I had a window seat. I was in economy, but I survived. Behind the wing, a few seats behind the wing. If I am in economy, that's usually where I try and sit. Why? I like the window seat. I am not disturbed by people exiting the row. But I look at the sensors from the rear perspective on that wing. During that flight, countless amounts of data would have been recorded, would have been beamed back. I think this was an Airbus aircraft. Would be beamed back to Airbus. Information about your wind speed, air speed, outside air temperature. Making sure perhaps that aircraft is flying efficiently, fuel efficiently, and maybe based on that and data from other aircraft, perhaps refining the aerodynamics of the aircraft if there was a benefit from doing so. So sensors there, quality control in production processes. Financial markets. I mentioned business, LSE, frankly, the majority of those studying quantitative degrees. They're the ones I lecture to or at, and many of those wish to go into investment banking, the hedge fund industry. Huge troves of data there. We have increasingly statistical hedge funds. They hoover up the PhD graduates in maths, stats, physics, engineering, and other related disciplines. Why? Well, perhaps they don't know the pure mechanics of how financial markets work, but they don't need to. They can pick that up later on. It's the analytical skills, mining these huge, perhaps terabytes of data, looking for patterns, looking for relationships, looking for arbitrage opportunities, trade accordingly, buy and sell, and hopefully make some money. But clearly, though, there's a lot of competition in this marketplace, and it's survival of the fittest. Get it right, you could make billions. Get it wrong, you could lose billions. Personal data, facial recognition systems, heavily data-driven. Text, unstructured data. Sentiment analysis. When there are various geopolitical events happening in parts of the world. You can look at the chatter, the buzz on, let's say, social media, people's Facebook posts, people's Twitter updates. These are words, qualitative data. But those words have sentiment, positive, negative, neutral. The volume of positive, the change from positive to neutral in the language could even be used to predict various events. Whether a dictator is overthrown, for example. There's work on building those kinds of predictive models. Image data, biomedical data, DNA sequencing. By no means an exhaustive list, but it goes to show the wide variety of career options those with strong data analytical skills could go into. I promised you a few case studies. We see some frivolous, some a little more serious. In the US, they have the hurricane season. Indeed, trying to predict the path of a hurricane, not an exact science, but there's a lot of satellites up there predicting the likely path, hopefully warning people a few hours or days in advance to take precautionary measures. Walmart clearly collects vast amounts of transactional data that represents the consumer behavior. They know exactly what was bought in particular stores at particular times of the day. They look at the history to try and predict the future. History may not perhaps repeat itself perfectly, but it could be a good indicator about what might happen if a similar event occurred again in the future. So in anticipation of the next hurricane, and sadly there will be more hurricanes hitting the US coast, when, where, exactly, don't know. We can't predict these things perfectly, but it's reasonable to suppose that in the next season there will be some more devastation. Hopefully, of course, no loss of human life. So Walmart, a retailer, looking at trying to predict consumption behavior. Leading up to a hurricane, what sorts of products might people demand? You want to ensure you can meet your consumers' demand and the shelves in your store are stocked with the products people want to buy. Well, some of it may be common sense. I love common sense. It's a great thing. Sadly, though, common sense is not, in fact, common. But I always tell my students they need a big dose of common sense going into my exams. They get an answer. They get an answer. And I tell them, do a reality check. Does the answer make sense? Stop, pause, think. Think about the context. It's not just doing the calculus, say. It's about having a real sense of meaning and context of their answers. Okay, water, flashlights, so torches, things like that, one might expect. But surprisingly, through mining, not just a few kilobytes or megabytes of data, trillions of bytes of data, quite a few zeros on the end of that one, it was found, it was revealed, a discovery, as scientists, but here as data scientists will do, found that sales for strawberry Pop-Tarts increased 7-fold. Why? I don't profess to offer an explanation, but apparently hurricanes seem to induce an appetite for strawberry Pop-Tarts. And also a particular DVD. I won't reveal which one or type of genre of DVD it was. But nonetheless, pre-hurricane, top-selling item was beer. Armed with that information, insights that common sense would predict. This common sense perhaps might not have predicted. Clearly, consumers' tastes and preferences evolve. Maybe in 5 years' time, next hurricanes 5 years in the future, maybe sales of other products will be increased 7 or 10-fold. So we won't rest on our laurels. We will clearly collect more data, reanalyze it, revise, update our knowledge in light of new information. This Bayesian form of updating central to a lot of statistical techniques. Churn. I love this. Great word. Churn. When a customer is sort of disloyal, when they leave a company, maybe a bank, the supermarket, an airline, and go to a competitor. Some industries are more prone to churn than others. In the UK, I read a statistic, you are more likely to get divorced than to change your bank. Allegedly. Because perhaps it takes time to build up a reputation with your bank. If you want to borrow money for a mortgage to buy a house, a loan to buy a car or go on holiday, or a loan to pay for your kids to go to college, say, you want your bank to know you. And to know you well takes time, and perhaps you don't want to switch so readily. Or maybe people are just lazy, and they're sclerotic and are not, quick to switch things. Switching your mobile phone provider, though, far more readily done. So churn, is it good, is it bad? Well, the classic LSE answer is coming up now. It depends. As a firm, if a customer churns from you to someone else, that's bad. You lose customers. Of course, you want other firms, your rivals, to experience lots of churn. You want to win those customers over. So is something good or bad? As usual, depends on perspective. But it is expensive for all those involved. There are costs. To prevent churn, have incentives. Airlines, the airline alliances. You collect your air miles, say. I'm racking up a few of those, but I tend to be more loyal to certain groups of airlines. Star Alliance, say, One World, things like that. Air miles which only have value if I continue travelling with that particular grouping of airlines. So you're trying to lock that customer in. Is that sufficient incentive to retain my loyalty? Perhaps. To retain other people's loyalty? Perhaps not. But if you are trying to attract new customers, you need some hook to bring them in. Why would someone leave one firm? What's better for them if they come to you? So there may be some marketing initiatives there. Data-driven decisions. Trying to, as your task, either prevent churn from you or to perhaps minimize the costs involved of attracting new customers. I'm not saying these are easy plans to come up with. It won't be one person in 10 minutes thinking this up. It will be a team spending days, weeks, months, perhaps, doing so. And even when there is a plan, to revise, to update this as new information comes to light. Perhaps another one, Bank of America. One could really look at any major bank here. Home equity loans. You've got money stored up in the bricks and mortar of your house. You can't spend that. There's the wealth effect. Economists say if house prices go up and you are a home owner, there's no more money in your bank account, but you feel rich, more likely to go spending. But maybe you want to release that equity. Well, some people will, other people will not. So if you can try and predict who is more likely to want to release equity from their homes and target those with your marketing, be it aggressive or passive marketing, more likely to get uptake and hence more business for that particular bank. So, of course, you could compete on price, specifically interest rates, effectively the cost of borrowing or releasing your equity. If the interest rates are lower, you as the consumers in this instance are more likely to want to, it's more attractive to release that equity. You may do that to bring in new customers. Great. But your existing customers may be a little bit annoyed by this, and perhaps they want a bit of that action too. So maybe to keep these happy and prevent churn, going back to that earlier problem, maybe you have to lower rates for everyone, unless they've signed a contract to lock this in. But even that's likely to be for a limited period of time. So that is just compounding the problem of depressing your earnings. If you get if your original rates were fairly competitive, even lower rates, who are you going to attract? Those footloose, disloyal customers, and do you really want to attract those if they will churn from you later on? So you can look at insights. Now, clearly, I'm sure within this room, we're from very different backgrounds in terms of our personal circumstances. Single, married, children, no children, elderly relatives, etc. And our particular personal priorities and financial commitments no doubt vary a lot within this room. As yet, I don't have kids, not that I know of. Thank you. People with college-age children want loans perhaps to pay the tuition fees. People with high but variable incomes, you want to consumption smooth. If you've done the permanent income hypothesis in economics, generally you earn low amounts in your early years, and as you progress through promotions, you earn more later on. Well, you'd rather have a more steady pattern of consumption over time. Students themselves may happily borrow money themselves now, get into debt, yes, but with the expectation of much higher incomes in the future, and indeed doing any of these sorts of degrees increases the probability of that good outcome. Again, though, probabilities. There's no certainties other than those death and taxes. So, this bank will have data on its customers, lots of data. Clearly, over time, collecting more information on its customers. Some it may explicitly ask for. You want to borrow money, there's a loan application form. They will ask you for particular pieces of information. Okay, common sense might say things like your income, number of financial dependents, period of time with your current employer to predict the stability of your income stream, etc. Of course, though, there's no coincidence. It's because those, among other things, will be an indicator of how likely one is perhaps to default on a loan or even to want a loan in the first place. But more recently, collecting data on more and more things. Hopefully relevant things. Although a lot of data which is collected, a lot of it will be noise, won't actually have commercial value. That's the earth. You're looking for the gold nuggets, the diamonds which exist within that. Okay? And hopefully you find lots of those. So you're using all of this, the classification of customers. Let's keep it simple. Classify into two types. Likely to respond to an offer versus not likely to respond to an offer. I'm sure in your personal email accounts you are flooded with spam email from various companies inviting you to buy things or whatever it may be. Most of you will probably press delete. You will not respond to that offer. One or two of you may in certain circumstances. If it was targeted correctly to you, Amazon, is that big here? Yeah, okay. Okay, so for example, for myself, I get various recommendations from Amazon of things I may like to buy. Customers who bought this also bought that. You bought this, therefore you are likely to want to buy that. They don't phrase it exactly like that, but that's their thinking. They've recommended products that they think I am most likely to buy. I usually press delete. Occasionally, they recommend something I hadn't heard of, but now I know I cannot live without. They clearly don't like customers like me. They love customers like me in that instance. The take-up of those promotions won't be 100%. It will be nowhere near that. Maybe 1%, maybe 2%. But given the size of Amazon's customer base, that's still leading to a big increase in absolute sales. So trying to predict, classify, likely to respond to an offer versus not likely to respond to an offer. When a university like LSE, we get 13 to 14 applicants per place for our undergraduate programs, all of whom are clearly very able students and can show a track record of excellent academic performance. The admissions officers are trying to predict from this vast pool of applicants, more than we can accept due to capacity constraints, who is most likely to be successful. And hopefully, we give offers to people who go on and be very successful. The majority do. Occasionally, though, someone signs up to a degree program, upon starting it, discovers it's perhaps not quite right for them. Maybe it's the institution, maybe it's the discipline. It doesn't happen often, but we can't predict things perfectly. So in that case, maybe try and improve the predictive model about who would be successful at a university. But back to our Bank of America example, cluster analysis. Remember that term, it will come up a little bit later. Segmenting your market. Doesn't matter what firm, business, industry you are in, you have customers. Maybe individuals like us, a B2C situation, business to consumer firm, maybe B2B, business to business. Your consumers are other firms, but there are still users of your good or service. Segment your market. Identify different types, but within these segments they will be not identical but similar. Arguably in this room we are a common segment. You did not have to come here, I assume, this evening, but presumably you all have some interest to varying degrees in data science, which is why you're sat here now. You're still sat here. The door I don't think is locked, so you are free to leave at any time, but I don't see you rushing for the exits. Either you're polite or you are really interested. Maybe both. I don't know. So they did this, and one cluster had some intriguing properties, a discovery. You don't know when those discoveries take place, but it's exciting when it happens. You find that gold nugget, you find that diamond, you are excited. It's your eureka moment. 39%, that's quite a precise figure, of people in a cluster had both business and personal bank accounts. Within that, more than 25% of customers had the attribute of being a likely responder to the home equity loan. So, note the word might. This is not definitive, it's not conclusive, but this is indicative. We are hypothesizing that such people might be using home equity loans to start businesses. Not all, but some of them. I'm not looking for perfection. This is not a perfect world. I will never get 100% response rate to any marketing initiative. When students come, there's an open day here tomorrow. Come along, please. I'll be there. I have to be, and I want to be. But clearly not everyone coming to an open day. Let's be realistic. There won't be 100% conversion of people at an open day anywhere to doing that program of study. But you would want to maximize that response rate. 7% might not sound good, but if you're starting from a base of 0.7%, that's a tenfold increase. This will never be 100%, unrealistic, but this will clearly be a successful initiative. Big data, I promised to touch briefly on this. Again, a nice phrase, sexy phrase. People like to drop it into conversation so it looks like they have their finger on the pulse about your business management speak. Give a definition, hard. You could have invited many speakers here tonight, and I'm sure they would offer variations of what big data is or are. Data, strictly speaking, a plural noun from the Latin of datum. Google, yay! Fountain of all knowledge, right? 2012, 6 years ago now, somewhat dated. There is a definition. Siri, 2017, still historic, but more recent historic. Wikipedia, don't we love that? Students love that. Yeah. To be fair, clearly, this would not pass muster as a serious academic reference in a journal. Nonetheless, for a very quick, ready resource, I'm not saying everything is factually correct on Wikipedia, but it's not bad, very quickly, to source some insight on some topic. I use it a lot. I know it's not perfect, but for an initial, speedy knowledge of something, that's a good place to have a look. Various definitions. Again, this is a selection, by no means exhaustive. But perhaps, I think we could pretty much agree on these as being some of the challenges of big data. And I'm going to summarize these as either the 4 or 5 Vs. This one in red is my sort of outlier, whether you wish to include this one or not. But it's a bit of a fun one, and I've got a couple of frivolous examples to come. Okay. But Vs: volume, variety, velocity, I love that word, value, and vanity. Big, I think that suggests that means there's a lot of this data. There's clearly the volume. The data deluge, that's a lovely phrase I hear a lot. You know, we are drowning in data. True. Fun fact, fun-ish, in my world it's fun. I think they would say typically now in the past 18 months to 2 years, more data was collected electronically in the last 18 months to 2 years approximately than in the rest of human history. Okay. Data recorded, collected. I think we can extrapolate that sort of trend going forward. There is no shortage of data. The shortage is having the right people, why you're here, who can make sense of this data, be it in finance, in business, in medicine, pharmaceutical industry, etc. There's no shortage of the data, but there's a huge skills deficit in people with the appropriate analytical skills to look through that data. Now, let's fast forward 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. Think about the rate of increase in that data collection. There is no way that the supply of graduates with those sorts of skills are going to keep pace with demand. It's not keeping pace now. That skills deficit is only going to widen because the demand is there. It's ever increasing. The supply will never keep pace. Economics 101. Demand exceeds supply. The price goes up. Price goes up. The price, of course, we are talking about here is a view of your human capital. When you work for a firm, say, you are selling your human capital, let's face it like that, selling your expertise. And if the demand exceeds supply, the price goes up. Of course, the price here converts to the salary that you can command. Of course, you could be an entrepreneur. You could be like this place in Hong Kong, start up your own app and lend money to people, putting perhaps some of your own capital at risk. But of course, if you want to be a billionaire, you will never be a billionaire working for someone else. You have to start up your own business. Of course, the upside there, potential is huge. But 1 in 1,000 startups will probably be successful. The rest will end in bankruptcy. High risk, but potentially very high return. If you are risk lovers, you will opt for that sort of path, be entrepreneurial. If you're risk averse, you'll play it safe. You'll have a safe academic position like yours truly, okay? For me, money's nice, but it's not everything. For me, happiness matters. So, okay, for some, money equals happiness. Our priorities clearly vary. I love what I do. I really, you can perhaps tell, I'm very passionate about this sort of stuff. And for me, teaching, lecturing, traveling around the world, I love it. It's great stuff. So volume is there. And that volume is only going to increase. Variety. Okay, we are all different. In this room, we'll have different heights, okay? Different weights, different IQs, different hair color, different all sorts of attributes. Some quantitative, some qualitative. There is variety. I said we were all similar in this room in terms of our interest in data science. Clearly there are many people in the world who hate numbers and they are quant-phobic and clearly would never entertain a career in the data science field. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. We are all different, have our different tastes and preferences. But there is indeed, as far as data is concerned, a lack of homogeneity in terms of the format of the data, the structure, and indeed the quality of the data. To go back, let's say, to perhaps my Amazon example. Amazon knows exactly what has been purchased by whom. You order something online, even if it's a gift for someone else, you'll have to enter your billing address or whoever's credit card you manage to get hold of to buy that product. Okay, so they know what's been purchased. So that consumer behavior is known. What they won't know is the attitudinal data. Why? Why did you buy product X, Y, or Z? You could ask people, you could survey them. You can't necessarily guarantee they would give you the right answer. In political science, you run an opinion poll, which party is going to win a parliamentary election, which candidate will win a presidential election. People give a response. Maybe they lie. Maybe they give a socially acceptable answer to a pollster. Maybe they refuse to respond. The quality of data cannot necessarily be ensured. Data can come in all different formats. In any empirical analysis, if you do academic research, fun fact, another statistic today, this sort of 80-20 rule. About 80% of time spent on an empirical analysis. I apologize for people over there. You don't fully see me. I'm sorry. Thanks for coming. 80% of the time spent will just be on data preparation, cleaning it, looking for outliers, anomalous observation, errors in that data set. It's not fun, it's not sexy, it is very tedious and very boring, but GIGO, garbage in, garbage out. I heard a friend of mine called it instead CISO. I won't tell you what the S stands for, but it's quite clever, I thought. Where was I going with that? Anyway, homogeneity of data. It's not homogeneous, it's in very different... Oh yes, 80-20. 80% of the time spent on preparing the data for analysis, 20% for the actual number crunching and the evaluation of it. So a lot of time is indeed preparing the data, cleaning it, making sure it is good quality. If not, any conclusions you draw are likely to be invalid and have unintended consequences or unexpected consequences if you go on and use it in your decision making. Velocity, wow, high speed of data generation and data processing. Well, the last 18 months, more data collected than ever before in electronic format. Goes to illustrate the point. Value, valuable information buried in a sea of data. That sounds so romantic, poetic, and clever. I love that phrase. You can use that, it's nice. Again, it's like digging through the earth for gold nuggets or those diamonds, okay? Vanity. Challenge, so these are all challenges. I'm not saying it's easy to solve all of these challenges. You know, life's not simple, it can be very complicated. But we at least need to acknowledge and recognize what the challenges are before you can have any hope of resolving those challenges. Vanity. Everything is significant and spurious correlations. Now, I will read this out. If your eyesight is like mine, you perhaps won't read it from the back. But you may see there's a couple of lines. There's a red one and a green one. Red one and a green one, okay? Correlation, 0.992082. Fun fact, if you don't know what a correlation coefficient is, it's a very simple metric to quantify the strength of the, if you like, the linear relationship between two variables. It can take values from -1 to +1. +1 is perfect, positive correlation. A perfect, positive linear relationship. Such that if you find such an extreme value, be it close to +1 or close to -1, then you think you've stumbled across a very exciting relationship. But remember vanity. You've got this huge amount of data. Inevitably, sooner or later, hard to say whether sooner or later, you will stumble across a very strong correlation, but this will purely be due to chance, what we call a spurious correlation. I just give 2 or 3 interesting examples. In green, US spending on science, space and technology from 1999 to 2009. In red, suicide, sorry to be a little somber here, suicides by hanging, strangulation and suffocation. They are nearly perfectly correlated. Okay. Now that's, if you like, data mining. It's found a correlation. A computer could work out that correlation. But we need to come in with a human brain and some common sense, which remember is not. Oh, yeah. Oh, you see. So correlation does not necessarily mean causality. I think there's no sensible argument, a sensible, rational person could offer that one of those causes the other. That correlation simply spurious. So there's nothing interesting there. It is a dead end, a false positive, if you will. Statistically significant. Run a t-test. Is that a significant, non-zero correlation? Oh, it will pass that test. You think you have a discovery. Those who've done statistics, a type 1 error, a false positive. Whenever you run any statistical test, you've done some stats, you reject a null hypothesis or you don't reject the null hypothesis. You hope you are right in that conclusion, but there is always a risk you are wrong. Example, you go to the doctor, you have a test, you're diagnosed for some illness, okay? They take a blood sample or whatever it is, and they give you the result. They say you've tested positive, or they say you've tested negative. You hope that that finding was correct. But of course, medical tests are rarely perfect. Maybe it was a false positive. You're healthy, but they misdiagnosed and said you had an illness when you did not. Maybe it's a false negative. You have the illness, but it was not detected. You hope you're right, there's a risk you are wrong. Just like juries making a decision, because hypothesis testing, which a lot of this will make use of, is simple decision theory. Deciding whether the defendant, I'm not saying you're guilty. Let's say you are the defendant. And the jury is making a decision, guilty or not guilty. What do you say?
Guilty.
Of what? Of loving data. Okay. Sentence, a great career. Okay. Of course, when a jury says guilty or not guilty, if you are that jury member, when you go home at night after the trial, you will hope you made the right decision. If you said guilty, the person goes to prison, you hope they were a naughty person and they deserve to go to prison. But maybe there's a doubt in there. False positive. They were in fact innocent, you made a mistake. You said not guilty, they walk free. You hope you're right, maybe you made a mistake, they might commit the crime again. Vanity, to more US crude oil imports from Norway and drivers killed in collision with a railway train. Correlation 0.95. Again, no plausible causation you could attribute. One more, yellow. Total revenue generated by skiing facilities in the US, and wait for this one, in red, number of people who died by becoming tangled in their bed sheets. It happens. To be fair, where I'm staying here, when I woke up, unfamiliar hotel room, you get perhaps a little disoriented. I was struggling for a little while to get up to bed with the bed sheet there, but I survived. There we go. Strong correlation. What a way to go. It happens. Not very often, but out of 7 billion people alive, sadly 1 or 2 or a few more than that, in the hundreds here, if this is perhaps maybe US, it happens. But the proportion is very small. But there are opportunities as well. I offer some examples, but again, by no means an exhaustive list. Problems. So you want to make the world a better place in some sense. I do. I want to make the world more numerate, and this is my small way of trying to achieve that. To enthuse students to pursue quantitative degrees, to gain mathematical, statistical skills, analyze things, and they themselves, by extension, solve problems, make the world a better place in some way. Arguably, we want to forecast the future. Maybe for noble purposes, maybe for less noble purposes. Maybe you have a machine. What's the chance that the thing malfunctions? Maybe you want to service it in advance. Better to preempt bad things happening, intervene early to prevent a bad outcome, or make it be less bad than it would have been. Okay. A heart attack, what's the chance of that? Well, from a financial perspective, if you're the insurance company, what premium do you charge? Clearly it reflects the risk of a heart attack of that particular person, which no doubt will depend on various factors. Lifestyle, age, gender, all sorts of things. Financial, again, default on a mortgage, committing a crime. Minority Report, Tom Cruise, I think, there was this pre-crime unit, trying to arrest people before they commit a crime. So especially if you had the intent of murdering someone, if the pre-crime unit prevent you doing that, is that ethical? Well, you save the victim, but maybe. Is this science fiction? Perhaps we can't do it today, but who knows? 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, who knows the improvement in our predictive abilities. I mentioned ethics, of course, big issue. Data privacy, Cambridge Analytica, heard about that one? Okay. Well, from an analytical perspective, if they were doing what they were alleged to have done, perhaps they were very good at predicting who might be these sort of swing voters in the Trump-Clinton presidential race, maybe in the Brexit referendum as well. I'm not going into the ethics. This is not Ethics 101, but of course that is a very important issue to consider. Now, I feel as long as people are upfront in the usage of data, if you are willing to volunteer personal information about yourself where you know that company would use your data to offer perhaps more appropriate products, offers, etc., and it was all transparent and you volunteered this knowingly, I don't see the problem. Maybe you don't want firms to know your various preferences and tastes, etc. Fine, but there's always going to be a trade-off. So arguably one of the challenges there, resolving those ethical issues. So I'm coming to the end. Some of the most frequently used data analysis methods. These, and so another slide to follow with a few more, these are some very widely used tools for solving sorts of problems. Classification. I've used that word a couple of times this evening. EDF, energy company, I don't know if it's known here or not, but energy suppliers. Where do you source your gas or electricity from? In the UK, the government is trying to make it very easy for consumers to switch supplier by making pricing information very clear, such that when your contract expires, are you on the best rate or would you be better at a competitor? So classifying who's likely to switch. You can't know for sure who will churn. But if you can predict with high probability who's most likely to churn, you will target your marketing budget at preventing that. Okay, we'll see some churn there. So, regression. How much will a given customer use the service? Value estimation. Banking sector. Customer lifetime value. Banks love to attract new students as they go off to university, many of whom may not have their own bank account. Remember, you're more likely to what than switch your bank account? Get divorced. If you're married, get divorced. That's more likely to happen. And therefore, you can see the customer lifetime value. A very low churn sector. So banks, students themselves at that moment in time are not profitable. But if you capture them, give them some gimmick products, say, or a cheap student overdraft, then you're likely to retain them. Then when they want the pension advice, the mortgage, the car loan, pensions, etc., then they will be very lucrative. So similarity matching. Customers who bought this also bought that. Who are your most loyal customer group? Do you want to reward them and prevent them from churning? Cluster analysis mentioned earlier. Market segmentation. Having your customer care teams, or if you need, it's a team-based organization, you want a team whose personalities match, who get on well. If they're working on an oil rig or working in the military, say, in high risk, arguably dangerous situations, as a team, as a unit, you need to trust each other well. On an oil rig and it goes wrong, it could be a substantial loss of life. So you need some matching, let's say, of personalities. Market basket analysis. In the supermarket, do you place product X next to product Y? Well, would people likely buy these things together? Done well, supermarkets can simply change which items are placed on which shelves. in which aisles, and they can substantially improve sales. Prediction. Happy person. Link prediction. I know these people, you know those people, there's a common connection, we may wish to be linked together. LinkedIn, for example, I get recommendations there. Facebook, friend recommendations, whatever. Causality, interesting thing. Network analyses. Disease spreading. Ebola, okay, that hit the headlines a few years ago. 10, 20,000 sadly died, but could have been far worse. I saw a story, it might be recurring, who knows? If we can model accurately how these such diseases are transmitted, again, try and intervene and prevent things from spreading. So just to really wrap things up, why am I here? Data science and business analytics, my brief sales pitch. A new degree. I'd like to think, I'm going to go out there and say pretty much a world first at the undergraduate level. You will find some master's programs in data science, business analytics, etc. You'll find a few of these increasingly at leading universities. LSE, we launched our own MSc in data science September just gone. We'll have our first graduating cohort. But at the undergraduate level, we did the market research. We couldn't really find any comparable programs in this field. And I'm delighted that Reinvest is going to be one of our very first institutions to run this program. There is an open day tomorrow. I'll be speaking on this as well as the other offerings too. And please do check online if you are perhaps interested in pursuing this with regards to the degree program structure. I won't go through this in detail, but rest assured, within these modules, they will cover a mixture of classification, regression, matching, clustering, and causality modeling. You will see and learn about many of these widely used techniques. You'll learn the theory, yes, but also practical applications. Depending on the specific module, in some cases you will be doing this on data sets and making discoveries. So, we have that, and very much in summary. Data science, again, many definitions one could provide, but perhaps a key takeaway. Exploring, that's what scientists do. Data scientists just use data to do so. Discover new patterns, trends, outliers, fraud detection. A strange-looking transaction is about to go through. Should the bank authorize it? Well, if it feels it might be fraudulent, it will block it pending further investigation. A red flag, maybe it's a genuine transaction, but the bank doesn't want to risk that fraud, which it may have to absorb the cost. Data. Think of it as the sea. You're a sea rich of data and information. You want to extract the good stuff, sift through the earth, find the gold, find the diamonds. Clearly in our degree, data science and business analytics, we will take a more business-oriented approach to this. Our degrees, under the academic direction of the London School of Economics and Political Science, with the awarding body of the University of London, these are within the so-called EMFSS suite, Economics, Management, Finance and Social Sciences. We don't do medicine, we don't do zoology at LSE, we focus on that sort of area, and so the more business sorts of examples will tend to feature. Discover new markets. Indeed, we've discovered, we'd like to think, a new market for this kind of degree. We're launching it because we feel there's a lot of demand. And early signs are that there is a lot of pent-up demand. We hope to meet that by supplying that degree program with those sorts of courses. Optimize and improve. Yes, you have systems in place, but are they optimal? You're making a profit. Good. But are you making the maximum profit you could? Could things be better? They can be good, but could they be better? Predictive analytics, and very British way to finish off. Please, remember, keep calm and analyze your data. Many, many thanks.
Thank you, James. Okay, we have some time hopefully for some questions. I'll start with the first one. I think data science is absolutely critical. I think the amount of data that is becoming available is incredible. It's going to increase a lot more with the new technologies that are coming up. One of the things that you mentioned, I think yesterday when you were kind of giving us an overview of the course, is that you said that you did some market research and you didn't see a lot of undergraduate data science and business analytics courses. Why is that? What did your research show? And is there an overlap with some of the kind of courses that are done maybe in some of the other fields like computer science and so on? So that's the first part of my question. And the second part of the question is the amount of data that is becoming available, the volume of data, velocity of that data, is making automation more and more necessary. What does that mean in terms of how we teach students in the future about data science, about that automation? And there is some competition, obviously, between artificial intelligence and a human performing some of the analysis. So what is the approach there? What do we need to kind of change in terms of the approach of teaching and lecturing to students?
Okay, thank you very much. So I'll perhaps deal with those in order. So, well, it's a new field. The reason why there's not much, if anything, out there, it's very hard to say a world first. I'm sure someone will find some program, but we did do extensive market research. It's a new field. Increasingly, universities have perhaps prioritized postgraduate provision of data science. With LSE, as I mentioned, we've only just started that provision ourselves. Clearly, we hope to, in the coming years, introduce this at the undergraduate level. We are really ahead of the curve with the international programs vis-à-vis our internal offerings. Usually, the international programs follows what we do within the LSE. In this case, we're working the other way around. Just because it was somewhat easier, more efficient to get approval through this than doing things internally. Of course, we have our capacity constraints as well. We'd love to welcome every student that applies, but it's just physically impossible. With our international offerings, it's far easier to have institutions the world over running these programs. But clearly the situation will evolve over time. And yes, increasingly more and more of these programs will appear. It's really the university sector responding to changing demand. Historically, academia is not known to be the most fast-moving sector. You want to change one policy, you've got to go through countless committees to achieve that. Indeed, to get the sign-off for this, to go through various stages. But there was a will, and I was trying to, personally put a lot of momentum to get this through as quickly as possible. So the world changes, and the skills required by employers change, and the university sector rightly should be responsive and adaptive to those. So will there be other programs launching like this around the world? Of course. But it's important you're one of the first movers in that, and again, delighted that Reinvest is one of our first institutions, new, of course, to teaching the University of London programs, but to choose this one in particular. So it's an evolving, it's a dynamic picture, and course offerings change. Courses get retired, indeed, within LSE. Some master's, undergraduate courses, if there's not demand, if they're not fit for purpose, they were at the time when they were launched, but things change, and we need to be adaptive to that. I remember while I was yapping your second question.
The second part of the question was to do with the artificial intelligence and
the automation. Thank you.
Automation.
Yes, job automation. Now, talking about challenges and opportunities, theme of this talk. Job automation itself, depending on which sorts of media you read, some are very positive about job automation. They see the opportunities. Some say about millions of jobs will be lost, clearly focused on the negatives. Well, it's a mixture of the two. there was a report, I think from Ernst & Young, but I'll stand to be corrected on the source, that was looking at predictions of the labour market in just 5 years' time. Okay, so if a student is about to embark on this degree, 3 years of study, 5 years is fairly close to graduation-ish date. There is this prediction, again, I potentially stand corrected on the source, but that in 5 years' time, 9% of the jobs in 5 years' time do not even exist yet. I can't tell you what these jobs are because no one knows. The world will be very, the labour market is very different. Uber, is that active here? No. You've heard of Uber? Well, there we go. So if, let's say, 20, 30 years ago, at school you told your careers advisor, when I grow up, I want to be an Uber driver. Of course, no one would have known what you were talking about. Uber didn't exist. In London, because I'm fairly London-centric, I mean, there's tens of thousands, 40,000 maybe, Uber drivers. So, employees, whether they are self-employed or whatever, legal semantics there, but many people doing this as their work. So, in 5 years' time, what will the labour market look like? Will jobs be lost to automation? I'm sure some will be. Clearly, some sectors are more at risk than others. But of course, think about technological advancement. When the automobile came along, cars, prior to that, let's say people rode around on horses, and there was a big industry employing people to make the saddles and the hooves on the feet of the horses. Now, clearly that sector was decimated. Now, are you telling me, therefore, the invention of the car was a bad thing? Things change. Now, clearly, some people are more adaptable to change than others. I'm not saying that's good or bad, it's just facts. And people, if they want to be successful in the job market of the future, need themselves to be able to adapt. I'd like to think there will always be students to lecture. I like to think analytics has a strong future. So personally, I think my employment is pretty secure. There's a demand for what I do. Clearly, other sectors that may be a different story. But of course, as things change, there are new opportunities. The car is developed. The car industry employs lots and lots of people. Autonomous cars, self-driving cars. Maybe Uber drivers, that career is maybe will be extinct in 5, 10, 20 years' time if all cars become autonomous. But again, there will be opportunities. So I think one needs to look at not just focus on pros or cons, but both. As far as educating students, it's our duty as academicians to prepare them for the job market and the changing job market of the future. I've mentioned a few certainties in life, the death and taxes, the usual one, but I think it's fair to say demand for graduates with strong quantitative skills. Demand's already there, and that demand for the foreseeable future, and I think within our lifetimes at least, that's there. You mentioned artificial intelligence. I've seen the Terminator movies. Okay? When I first saw them, I was quite scared. I was young, but seemed science fiction. Maybe that's where the world is heading. Stephen Hawking sadly passed away recently. I think he predicted maybe Terminator was not so much science fiction, might be science fact. The future is uncertain, but I don't see that happening anytime soon.
I think. I'll hand over to some questions from the crowd now as well. So, okay. The gentleman there.
Hello, hi.
Microphone in that in.
Hi. Thank you so much for taking the effort and time to talk to us. I hope this question is not too out of the context and purpose of this lecture, but you mentioned something about looking at data science from business side, and I know you've lectured to MBAs about data science at Holt University. I don't know about the University of London. How different is that approach from managers? In other words, how deep into the technical side should the managers go, to be competent and comfortable managing a team of data scientists?
Okay, well, you mentioned MBAs there. Perhaps to take that in the generic MBA capacity. Now, clearly, different students are doing different things. If they're signing up for the data science and business analytics degree, clearly they need to have strong mathematical quantitative skills. There's a mathematical entrance requirement. However, different people focus on different areas in an organization. An MBA student is aiming to be, some have a managerial position upon completion, regardless of business school they go to. Now, those managers, let's say they are the decision makers. Let's be the top manager, the CEO. You decide whether you launch a product. You decide whether you open a factory in another country, say, or enter a new market. Now, I think the managers themselves, they are not, let's say, that the number crunchers themselves. They are not building the algorithms. They don't need to know exactly what a regression involves or the theory behind cluster analysis. But they do need an appreciation about what the insights which come out of these techniques are. They need to know what to do, and it helps if they have a broad understanding about what these techniques involve. I mentioned cluster analysis, this classification into groups where people are similar in some sense. I gave the example, you all in this room, you chose to come to this talk under your own free will, I hope and assume, because you have all that common interest in data science, analytics, etc., etc. And now, I'm sure within this room, the mathematical backgrounds of you vary a great deal, but you all have that general common interest. Now, at the big picture level, saying everyone in this room has the interest in data science, I think everyone can relate to. Does everyone in this room need to know the exact mechanics of how that cluster analysis, that statistical technique works? Does everyone need to know that? Does the manager need to know that? No, he or she does not. But clearly, there does need to be that expertise within the organization. Someone has to do the analysis. So it depends where one sees oneself in the organization. Are they at the front line, during the number crunching, during the analysis, and they need to know those techniques inside out? Or are they the ones who just need to make that informed decision? But to make an informed decision, you do need some sense of context. Yes, you don't need the equations, you don't need the various proofs behind things and why they are what they are, but you need a broad insight as to how these work. So, different people are looking at different positions in an organization. So, clearly, to do this degree, they will get to look under the bonnet, see that the nuts and bolts of it and how all of this stuff works. That's what I specialize in. Others are perhaps focusing more on those managerial positions. Clearly, though, when I teach students, I'm very conscious of who that audience is. Now, I don't know your specific backgrounds, and there wasn't a single equation here tonight. Now, I'm sure some of you would have loved to have seen some equations. I predicted, whether I'm right or wrong is another matter, but I predicted there will be some in this room who would perhaps not be comfortable with loads of equations. So I made a prediction and presented it in that way. If I knew you were all hardcore mathematicians, I would have pitched it very differently. So when I teach students, if they are undergraduate, postgraduate, from more qualitative or quantitative backgrounds, you do adapt again to the level, the approach that you take, and try and, as best as possible, ensuring it's fit for purpose. So, as someone doing an MBA, MBA applicants are from a very broad range of backgrounds. Yes, they have business experience, but maybe they did English literature at university and have never seen an equation since very young at school. Clearly, that's a different audience and perhaps not best suited to this particular degree. There's this heterogeneity. We're all different, and this is aiming at a particular segment. An MBA degree is again aiming for targeting a specific segment.
Okay. Next question, gentlemen.
Well, thank you for this wonderful lecture. First. My question is, my background is I'm lecturing databases for students.
Okay.
So my interest is the volume of the data that we are gathering in the institutions like the health or policy or whatever. There is a big data that are accumulated in the servers. What is the future of this gathering of data, especially if we want to be comparable with each other, to be available in some applications that we use? How to create a platform so that makes this data comparable with each other? What are your expectations?
Okay, I'll perhaps have some blue sky, or hopefully a license for some blue sky thinking here. Certainly a challenge, I accept that. And really, data science, a catch-all term, and I think to be a very effective data scientist, one needs a mixture of skill sets. The mathematics, the statistics, computer science in there as well. Myself, I mean, statistics is my field of expertise. Of course, though, we need the data, and it's got to be stored somewhere and easily accessible. I would hope over time, when, I mean, predicting things is, I can make a prediction, only time will tell whether it's right or wrong. But I'd like to think of I think of it more as a data culture. What we need to inspire in organizations, they can be commercial firms, but in the public sector as well. Governments have at their disposal vast amounts of data, and I suspect most of that is untapped. I'd be surprised if more than 1% of data which is collected or are collected is ever analysed in any great depth. So it shows the huge potential of things to look out for there. And if a stronger data culture is developed in all sectors, then I think there will be the will to, again, from the technical side of it, it's not my field of expertise, but if there's the will there, then sooner or later, whether it's sooner or whether it's later, again, hard to say. But in my utopian world, we are heading for utopia, then data, vast troves of it, very quickly captured, very quickly cleaned, very quickly available for analysis. But blue sky thinking about quite when these sorts of events will happen. But I'd like to think people are waking up to the importance of data. Of course, the very important people you need to convince are the movers and the shakers, the politicians, say, the CEOs at the corporate level. If you have that sort of top-down, rather than focusing more bottom-up, but if those the movers and the shakers, if they are convinced, they don't need to know the equations and theories, but if they are convinced this is the right sort of way to go, then of course that's going to trickle down, filter down, and if there's the will, I always feel if there's the will, there will be the way.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions? Okay, if there are no more questions, James, I'm going to thank you again for the lecture, and maybe we can continue afterwards.
If I make just one final closing remark from me, I'm sure on those lovely seats, I feel it's a bit like a mini cinema. I think those seats look really pretty great. I saw those nice little red, oh yes, you have the red, I assume every seat had one of these. I will plug as I'm here. If you are perhaps there's a little bit of interest has been sparked in you to whatever extent, whatever degree, we will be holding an open day, 4:30 tomorrow. Will there be nibbles and refreshments? So there will be an open house. Feel free to turn up. I'll be here, as will others. Is it in a particular room?
Yeah, here.
It will do. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
You know where to come. 4:30, mini presentation, not just on data science. We will touch on, of course, all three of those degree programs. I'll be here. Reinvest representatives will be here. Please do ask us your questions. I'm sure further doubts or queries may arise overnight. Please come back. 4:30 tomorrow, we will be here. Perhaps final word from me. Thank you very much for your time coming here this evening. I hope you enjoyed it. And indeed, hopefully, please take away the message, spread the word, okay? People power here. Developing that data culture. Tell your friends, family, associates the importance of this. The more people who are infused by this, there's a lot of discoveries out there. Yes, many challenges, but arguably unlimited opportunities. And the future, I think, is very exciting for a more data-driven decision-making world. on that note, for me at least, again.
You're here, so you have another chance tomorrow.
Okay, thank you very much.
That was very good.
Okay. Espresso.